I was just taking a look at this book today. This is the Justice Society of America trade from Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns was the creator of STARGIRL, and the book is really well drawn. It's really well. It's pretty nicely written, and you know, you see STARGIRL there. Actually, in the comic book, she's not STARGIRL. Actually, in this comic book, she's not STARGIRL. She's the Star Spangled Girl. The Star Spangled Kid, excuse me. And none of this has anything to do with the show. The character is Courtney, though, just like the show. And I really like Jeff Johns generally. I mean, he's done some pretty good stuff. I don't think his producing, when it comes to some of the movies, has been very good at all. I can't understand, coming from such a good writer, why he's not done such a good job with the DC universe. I mean, the DC universe is just terrible. And what they've been doing with the WB shows is, especially like Batgirl and Stargirl. I mean, Stargirl isn't that big of a deal when it comes to identity politics and the SJW stuff. I mean, they do have a diverse cast, but that's fine. I mean, it's not really something that they speak of in the show. And it's not really a problem because of that. To me, it's not, but some people do have a little problem with it. But I have a lot of little problems with the show anyways. The good points about the show, I do believe that it is, the special effects are pretty decent on it. The cast is, they got a pretty beautiful cast with they got a lot of, good looking people on it. And, but other than that, the story is just, I mean, it's just not very good. I mean, but basically you have the Justice Society of America and the Injustice Society of America. And a lot of the problems, I started thinking at first, when I first started making this video, I was going to talk about how it feels like a Marvel ripoff. And the thing about when you start looking into Marvel and DC, you start seeing what characters were kind of made at what times, and sometimes Marvel characters are ripoffs or kind of clones of DC characters, and vice versa. And you have a lot in this show, like, really, and even this comic book. The comic book to me feels like classic DC mixed with the Watchmen, just the way it's kind of drawn, and just the feeling of the book. But the show, it has the feeling of, it feels like Marvel to me. It feels like the X-Men, and there's definitely some direct rip-offs of the X-Men, especially when it comes to Cerebro at the very end of the movie. Well, that's throughout the movie. They're basically creating, it's Cerebro. They even go into the chamber, and it's basically just a giant machine made to amplify brainwaves, which is one of the villain in the show, amplify his brainwaves so they can take over the Midwest, basically, and control people's thoughts. And and a lot of the characters are kind of, I feel like they're a little bit ripped off of Marvel, but you can also look at it vice versa. Another, Stargirl feels like she's a little bit of Captain America, and kind of a mix between Captain America and Wonder Woman. And in the Justice League comic book, she really doesn't have any power. She just kind of stands on her own. She's not Stargirl yet. Starman's still in the picture, and yeah, I mean it's a big difference. There are some standalone Stargirl comics that I don't own. I may try to buy them later on just to check them out and see how their stories are. I think they're called Stargirl and let's see his name there. Yeah, it's and I think it's Stargirl and Stripes. I think the name of the comics are Stars and Stripes, I believe. But you know the it has a lot of little problems like that that it just made the story kind of ungenuine. And I'm trying to think of what the really, all the stuff I want to talk about. It's kind of, how I am. You guys have seen my channel, and how I'm back and forth. I just want to, you know it's basically about a girl who's from LA, who gets taken to Blue Valley, Nebraska by her new stepdad, which is Owen Wilson, which happens to be Stripes, or Stripey, his sidekick name, and becomes Stripes, the giant robot sort of sidekick to Stargirl. And I don't know, it's definitely the story is definitely, I don't call it full blown Mary Sue, but I don't know what it is about modern comics and why they're wanting to, when they give a girl a role, they just automatically have all their powers. There's not really any training. This storyline could have been done a little bit better, and in the Mary Sue part may not have been as much of an issue. I mean, part of all the characters that get powers, they get their powers from their MacGuffins. And this is where the MacGuffin part starts coming in. Like, every character has a MacGuffin. It's kind of like the Green Lantern. The Green Lantern has his lantern and the ring, those basically gave him his powers. And this is kind of everything in this show. Like, nobody has like real superpowers. Everybody has some kind of MacGuffin that gives them their powers. Except, I think maybe, I don't know if Icicle and like Brainwave, they're kind of, they don't, but the villains, but all the heroes are pretty much MacGuffin driven characters, and it's kind of funny. They yeah, I mean, but going back to the whole Mary Sue thing, is Stargirl herself, Courtney, like, there's no explanation earlier in the show. There's no real explanation that says that she's like kind of like an all-state gymnast. She's like a really great gymnast, but there's no explanation of it, really. The only early explanation of it until episode 3, which is far after she's become Stargirl, is that I think in the first episode, while she's getting her student ID made, she's like talking to the person who's taking the picture, which I assume is kind of like the student council, the person doing that. She's asking her, well, why don't you have a gymnastics team? Why don't and the woman's like, oh, we just don't have one here, and no real explanation, but you should be a cheerleader. That's kind of the same thing, and that's the only, there's no, like, she's never talking, there's never a scene where she's like looking at her trophies and pondering like, oh, I'm gonna miss all this, but there's no explanation. She just, after she finds the Starman staff, she automatically just starts doing all these acrobatic moves with the staff. And I mean, you can credit it to maybe the staff is enhancing her own abilities, and that's fine. But that's it'd be much better if they had just come out in the beginning and said, yeah, well, if they'd had a scene, it could have just been one or 2 minute scene in the first episode where she's, either at the very beginning she's maybe at a gymnastic contest doing well, or just her talking about it. I mean, and that's all you'd have to do, but it doesn't come up until like the third episode. Like it's like a dinner scene, and they're talking about it. So yeah, I used to be a gymnast and stuff, and that's really it. I mean, the other scene don't really quantify as an explanation. She's just asking the question. And so I mean, that's it. And I believe that scene, and I'm trying to think of that scene. I believe does come before. It does come just a little before she becomes Stargirl, but it's just I don't know. It's just full of stuff like that, you know. And probably one of the favorite characters in the show is her little brother Mike, you know. And you know, Stargirl has a lot of, I call it daddy issues. She has a lot of problems. She thinks that Starman is probably her dad because she's able to wield the powers of his staff, the cosmic staff. And I don't, you know, the Owen Wilson character is her stepdad, and he just, you know, it's just coincidence that he meets her mom back in this little town in the Blue Valley where he's supposedly tracking down the Injustice Society, and he you know, he decides to move here, even though he says later on in the series, oh well, you know, my leads went cold here, so I'm going to move here. You know, there's just inconsistency in the writing that don't make sense. And this is, you know, kind of all over the place in here. You know, this little stupid things, you know, she floats downtown on her staff, like right through the middle of town, and, you know, presumably at 8 o'clock at night, and there's like nobody out. Nobody sees her. You know, it's a small town, but it's not, you know, it's not super small. It's like, you know, it's kind of ridiculous. She's doing all this stuff. I think somebody else brought that up in the video. How it's kind of ridiculous. Oh, she's just doing all this stuff right in the middle of town, basically. And also, you know, Stripes, the big giant robot. If you've seen the show, you know, he's based out of Luke Wilson's garage, which Luke Wilson's character Pat Dugan, when he gets in town, he basically buys a garage to do auto mechanic work, but in the back it's kind of like the secret lair. It's like where he keeps Stripes, the big giant robot. He just keeps it in the back room of this garage, and then he just been in presumably this is just in the middle of town, so he just goes from, you know, he just like opens the garage door, walks out, and takes off flying, or presumably walks with this giant robot, you know, which it's not gigantic, but it's pretty big. But you know, this funny things, just little stupid things like that, it kind of bug me in these shows like that. You know, another good thing is it has a kind of an interesting 50s and 60s soundtrack. It kind of begins the show and ends the show. You know, the rest of the music is orchestrated, and it's, you know, it's kind of over the top superhero music throughout the show. But then they kind of have this buffer music where it's like 50s and 60s music starting off the show and kind of ending the show. And I like that. That's interesting. But other than that, it's, you know, it's just kind of your typical superhero soundtrack. Yeah, I was talking about Luke Wilson as well. Luke Wilson, he just basically plays Luke Wilson in it. I mean, Luke Wilson always just plays Luke Wilson, always. I've never seen him, and it's fine. I've always liked Luke Wilson all the way back to, like, I think probably the first movie he was in, which was Bottle Rocket, a Wes Anderson movie, and that he was in with his brother Owen as well. And I've always enjoyed Luke. That's why I was kind of excited about seeing him in this show. He's kind of brings a warm spot to this this little dim show, but he's still playing himself. And, you know, and at first Courtney, Stargirl, she doesn't really like him too much, and it's kind of warming up to his character kind of storyline. You know, they've kind of become crime fighting partners in a way, or trying to solve the Injustice Society and figure out who they are. But that's one thing the show does kind of get right a little bit. It gets that whole teenage um, the whole teenage kind of vibe. She's always really headstrong and won't listen to anybody because Pat Luke Wilson is always basically trying to tell her, no, don't, you don't need to do this. You're going to get hurt doing this. And she's just always defying, like she always defies whatever he says and just goes in, head full of steam, and no matter the outcome. And at least a little, about to go back to the Mary Sue thing, she kind of gets her, she don't never really get her butt kicked too much. She kind of always prevails in the situation she's in. She never necessarily has to learn her lesson. And that's a little bit how Captain Marvel was. And Captain Marvel was really bad about this because, she just kicks butt from the beginning to the end, and there's no consequences. There's no learning, And this character is a little bit like that. She gets a few scrapes a couple of times, and they try to develop the character a little bit like that. But for the most part, she's kind of Mary Sue-ish. But the diversity and things in the show is pretty good. It's not over the top. The problem I have with the diversity in the show is probably I think mostly you see it there's, this is a little small town in Nebraska, and there's a lot of, African Americans in this town, and it's like, no, you ever been to Nebraska? And the problem is I don't have a problem with that, but I have a problem with them being a lot of the background artists. I mean, there's a few prominent characters. There's a Latino girl who plays Wildcat, and the other, and the black girl who plays, which I have all their names here. I apologize. I'm not trying to be like that, but let's see here. Yvette Monreal plays Wildcat, and Apika Washington plays Dr. Midnight, which is a little bit of an odd name to be calling an African American character, but I don't guess they got any heat from it, so. But the interesting thing about but it seems like a lot of but like I was saying, there's a lot of you see a lot of the black actors, but they're all like, they're background artists, and that's for the most part their background in the town. They're not really prominent. The most prominent characters, like I was saying, is the Anika Washington, excuse me, and her parents in the show. Her mom's like a doctor, and her dad, I'm not sure what he does, but they're both. But you don't really see them in person much. Her mom is just like on her webcam sometimes, and her dad's the same way. I think there's one scene where they come to like the parent teacher conference at the school, and that's about it. It's not a big deal. It's not about them anyways, but it's just kind of funny. It's kind of funny. I noticed that about it. Amy Smart's in this show. She's plays the mother, and she's not that great, I don't think. Amy Smart, I mean, she's pretty sexy, but she's, kind of one range. She don't really have a lot of range, and I just don't care much for her character in this. She's just the mom character, and kind of the clueless mom character, but she actually works for the organization that's being ran by Icicle and Brainwave, and they're basically, and this is where I will get into the politics on this video. If I end up making this a two-part video, I'm going to get into the politics of it a little bit, because the politics are wonky. I wish they just left any politics out of it, because it don't make a lot of sense what they're doing. At first, you think they're doing one thing, and then by the end of the show, by the end of the season, their agenda shifts, and it's don't make any sense. But basically, they basically have this organization who wants to, and it essentially is kind of make America great again in a sense. But it's their organization basically wants to go around the country and revitalize the industry and rebuild the factories, and essentially it's the agenda of Trump, which is when I first seen it, it's like, oh no, they're the bad guys are associated with this. They're gonna make this why is that a bad thing? We want that to happen. No matter if you like Trump or not, you want your communities to be rebuilt and people to be able to have jobs. I mean, if you ask anybody in the Detroit area, that they want their factories rebuilt and their factories returned from China and from overseas, yes, they want to be able to work. But the problem is like, after that, after they talk about that basically once in the show, you never really hear about that again. It's never really brought up except for a couple of times when they're talking about it. It's not really a part of the agenda, but the underlying agenda goes back to the cerebro part of it. Like, they're building this big machine and basically they want to, brainwash the country for the believe in their values and there's actually towards the end but this message kind of shifts to the left position at the very end. There's a scene where they're getting ready to go into the final fight, and they're basically naming, and they're like, well, what all of these guys want? They want us to, they want to return, they want to rebuild the industry, they want to do away with, they want to they want to get rid of global warming and some of these agendas like that. And then in Stargirl's like, well, why are we fighting them for? And they're like, yeah, and it's kind of a doink moment in the show, and they're like, yeah, why are we fighting them? And it's kind of like, yeah, like, what exactly is the agenda? What are they getting at in the show? I mean, I'm like, that's why I wish I just left politics out of it, because it just don't make much sense, because they're kind of like, I don't know, it's pretty funny, and you watch it because it don't make their agenda it doesn't correlate to like their plan of world domination or like Midwestern domination. They're not aiming very high with this plan, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny. Well, hopefully you got through my rambling on Stargirl. I thought about making a part 2 of this, but I think I'm just going to leave it at one parter because I don't really have anything else to say about it. I've rambled on enough about it, and that's really the only thing I really wanted to kind of bitch about. So I appreciate you guys watching, and hopefully I get a few more subscribers, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share. I said I wasn't going to say all that stuff, but apparently people need to be reminded of that. So I appreciate it if you did all 3. Talk to you later.